Everybody. Good evening, I'd like to say. Glad to see so many people in the room. My name is Wilfried Rutten. I'm the director of the European Journalism Center. We are running this workshop here at the Data School together with Open Knowledge Foundation. The two colleagues here will go into more detail later on. I'd just like to thank the organizers for having us again. We did a similar session last year. It was similar crowd, similarly full rooms, and quite a lot of excitement that we created there. And last year we also started to do the book on data journalism, which these two ladies here have been substantially working on, and they will get very famous because now it gets translated into Chinese as well. So they might either not ever be able to enter the country or maybe not leave the country anymore once they go there. So let's see. So we're doing 4 sessions on a panel level and 4 sessions on workshop level until Saturday. We have a lot of very good speakers, obviously. I'm really proud everybody came and spends the time with you and us. And I'd like to just draw maybe one attention to a session we do on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, so it's a quite steep time. That's why I'd like to mention it here, on emergency journalism, how you can use data in emergency situations and what it means for journalists to be able to curate all this huge amount of Twitter feeds and things that come up, like from the Boston killings or from earthquakes and tsunamis and things like this. And I hope to see you around for a longer time. Maybe just one remark, just I heard in the street, there were 2 Austrian tourists, and one said, yeah, there's a journalism festival in Perugia here. And the other one said, yeah, that profession is dying out. Let me tell you, it's not dying out. We're doing pretty good. I'm looking at you guys. We'll be around for some time to come still. So thank you for your attention. I give it to Liliana, who's running the show here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Wilfried said this is the second time we've done this. The first panel session that we've got is going to be essentially a recap from the past year of what's happened. So we had a session last year which was what is data journalism, and now a year later we're going to get some of the same speakers to come back and reflect on what's changed about it since last year. I'm just going to say a little bit about the Open Knowledge Foundation. Is it possible to have the slides up here, because there are some important links on it? There we go. So the Open Knowledge Foundation is an organisation based across the world. We're an international network of people. And we work both on the supply side and demand side of open data. So we both work with organisations and work with governments to help open up information. And my job, and the reason that I work with Liliana, is I work on the demand side. So I help people who see that there is data out there and need to be able to use it to make use of the information that is available. And so we're called the Open Knowledge Foundation because we believe that data is only as good as it only turns into knowledge and information when it gets used. So I work with developers, I work with NGOs, and I work with journalists to help them use the data. We have a new project called the School of Data, schoolofdata.org, and the link was on the website, on the slide up there. It's not up there. It is, which is doing all manner, a couple of different things. Working online, where we've got courses online, and working offline. We're experimenting with new ways of learning. We realise that people are very excited about journalism and how they can use data in it. But we realised that it wasn't enough. People never came to us with a problem. They never really said, I need to learn how to scrape. I need to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. The problem was a lot more basic than that. They didn't even know what was possible. So we've developed a methodology which we are calling data expeditions, which are essentially a problem-based team way of learning. So what we do is we group together people with different skill sets. So people like developers, people like designers, journalists, people with good storytelling and analytical skills, and we put them together in a group and we give them a challenge, and they help each other to solve a problem to solve a problem and learn from each other. And we've been running these particularly in combination with next to hackathons because they work really well in combination. We also run data clinics, so we get people like journalists to bring their data to us and sit down with them in small groups and help them to fix their problem by working with their data. So that's a bit about the Open Knowledge Foundation, and Liliana's just going to fill in a couple of gaps about the European Journalism Centre.
Thank you, Lucy. I am Liliana Bounegru. I am leading data journalism activities at the European Journalism Centre, and I'm very pleased to see so many of you here today. I'll tell you a few words about what we have been doing in this area over the past years. Some of you might know some of our projects already. We run a website dedicated to data journalism called datadrivenjournalism.net. Could the slide still be up, please? Great. So we run a website dedicated to this topic where we publish tutorials, interviews with practitioners, case studies, basically anything that would be useful for someone who wants to get started in this field. Last year in Perugia, we released the Data Journalism Handbook, which is a collaborative manual authored by over 70 of data journalism leading practitioners and advocates. The book was also published by O'Reilly Media in print form in July. In 1 year's time, we've seen tremendous interest in this book. It's been translated already in Russian by the news agency RIA Novosti, and many other translations are underway in Portuguese, Chinese, Arabic, Turkish, and many other languages. And one announcement for today is I've just found out that the Spanish translation has just been released. It's been done by the Argentinian newspaper La Nación. So we're very pleased that they managed to translate the book in a few months' time. The last thing that I want to mention is a mailing list, which is how we stay in touch when we're not in events. So if you go to datadrivenjournalism.net, you will be able to subscribe to the mailing list to stay up to date with what is happening in the field. All right, before I hand over to Lucy, a few logistical details. This session and all the sessions in the School of Data Journalism will be recorded, and the video recordings will be posted online on the festival website in about 1 day after each session. We will additionally be publishing tutorials from the workshop sessions and articles from each of the sessions on schoolofdata.org and datadrivenjournalism.net. And one last thing, we are reporting live on Twitter, so the hashtag is DDJSchool, so please follow the hashtag also for tips and news from this event. I'll now hand over to Lucy to get started with the panel.
I don't do that. Thank you, Liliana. Can everybody hear me? Is this loud enough? Excellent. I would just like to take a moment to introduce our fantastic speakers. We have a couple of repeat customers from last year, Erin and Guido, and a new face in Dan. I'm sure that Erin told me last year that he was absolutely sick of data journalism, and I should never invite and we should never invite him ever again to talk about it. But he has consented to come and talk to us about it again. So thank you very much for bearing with us. I'd just like to, you can introduce yourselves far better in your own words than I ever could. So I'd just like to give you each 5 minutes to explain to everybody what it is that you do, how it's connected to data journalism, and we will go through it. Then I'll proceed with questions like normal. Erin, would you like to kick us off?
So I didn't exactly say that. That's not. I think that might be a slight. Anyway, I am actually thrilled to be here, and I apologize for being slightly late. I actually had a panel just before this, halfway across town, so I came over here as quickly as my little feet would carry me. And I'm, again, delighted to be here because I think, you know, we now have standing room only in this room to talk about something that, let's be very honest, data journalism, it does not sound sexy. This is not a term that immediately makes you think, ooh, I want to do that. But, you know, let's look at the Pulitzer Prizes from this year, and let's look at the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service, which was won by the Sentinel for a story that they did on police officers speeding, and not just speeding, in many cases going twice, maybe more, the speed limit. It's something that we as journalists and drivers have always known was happening, that one of the worst offenders of speeding laws are those who are actually paid to enforce them. But how are you going to get at that story? Well, the only way you can do it is through data and data analysis. And that story was relatively quick to put together. That wasn't like a 4-year investigation. That was just a really smart set of freedom of information requests and a really savvy data analysis and a lot of reporting on top of it. But that's the power of data journalism, and that's kind of why I've kind of committed my career to it. So my background is political reporting. I was a political reporter for many, many years at the state level in New Jersey. I worked a number of different places before that. Then I went to Washington, D.C., where I was the data editor for an organization called the Center for Public Integrity, where Chuck Lewis is the founder. Some of you may know him. He's a fairly well-known journalist from the U.S. And then I came to the New York Times. And I started at the New York Times in 2005. And I was utterly shocked to find what I found, that at a newsroom in Washington at the Center for Public Integrity, which was about 41 people, we were able to do things both internally in terms of data and data analysis and online in particular that we couldn't do at the New York Times. So that's how my current job actually happened, because I started agitating around saying this is ridiculous. The New York Times is this enormous newspaper with these incredible resources and 1,100 people in this newsroom, and I can't get a simple searchable database online. That's insane. So I now run a team called Interactive News, which was a made-up name for a made-up team. I'm the editor of it because I run it, and it now consists of about 18 developer journalists who do everything from data mining to data analysis to building news applications, public-facing news applications. About 2 years ago, I also took over the social media team, which is about 7 people, and I also run the community team, which is our comment desk. And I just last month started a newsroom analytics team, which is really, really important. We really need to start using the tools of data analysis and analytics to help understand how we can be more effective and impactful as journalists. And that's the power. And thanks to Dan right here, we have a fellow from the Knight Mozilla Foundation for 10 months working with us on that. So that's pretty much what I do right now. Yeah, and with that, I think I'll turn it to Dan.
That was an elegant handoff. Wow. I'm Dan Sinker. I'm the director of the Knight Mozilla Open News Project. And it's a program that's funded by the Knight Foundation, which is one of the, actually the leading funder of kind of journalism innovation around the world. And it's run by Mozilla, who are the folks that bring you the Firefox Firefox browser, soon to be Firefox OS as well. But more so is a nonprofit organization dedicated to making sure that the web remains free and open. And so kind of at the crux of those two organizations is where Open News lies. What we're really dedicated to is helping to strengthen and build the ecosystem around the community that's building journalism for the web, right? and so that means working with teams like Aaron's. It means working with folks like La Nación in Buenos Aires. It means working with people all around the world that are really helping to define not only what data journalism is today and where it's going, but also where software development in the journalism space on the web is going to go, and how do we kind of help to facilitate the people that are already doing it and already doing it at the level that people like Aaron's team are doing, but how do we also bring new blood into this community and really help to build up the folks that are doing it. So we have a number of different ways that we're doing that. At the center of what we do is a fellowship program. We actually place developers for 10 months in newsrooms, embed them in newsrooms to be able to do experimentation and kind of independent and loosely affiliated projects. So we have 8 fellows in newsrooms right now, including Annabelle Church. Do you want to just wave really quickly? They're waving. Annabelle is our fellow at Zeit Online in Germany. We also have fellows at Spiegel Online in Germany, at the BBC and the Guardian in the UK, at the New York Times, and at ProPublica in New York, at the Boston Globe in Boston, and then at La Nación down in Buenos Aires. Those fellows are 2013 fellows. Last year we had 5 fellows at a subset of those news organizations. And really what they're doing is kind of experimenting and really beginning to try new things in an open manner, both in terms of what they're learning and what they're building, in order to kind of help throw new code into the mix. One of the things that our fellow at La Nación released this year in coordination with our fellow at ProPublica is actually a really amazing data journalism tool called Tabula, which is still in kind of a beta phase, but essentially it takes PDFs that have tables in them, which is just a horrible way to present your data, and almost magically allows you to draw a little box around the table and it extracts the data right out. It's an amazing tool. So we're able to do things like that. We're also funding additional tools like that through a program that we call Code Sprint Grants, which has built an XML parser for election data in the States. We're funding through this simple data visualization tool that actually uses Google Spreadsheets as a back end, and we actually have a few more that we're going to be announcing pretty soon. We also kind of act as a hub for what this larger community is doing through a website called Source, which is at source.mozillaopennews.org, which collects the activities of this community that's making code in journalism, gives kind of Q&As and with teams. So when, for instance, the New York Times team that did the snowfall visualization, we had an extensive Q&A with them on Source. It also does roundups. We just put together a pretty good collection of the various interactives that came out after the Boston Marathon bombing last week, and any number of other things. We also sponsor hack days around the world to build and kind of build the community as well as build tools in the journalism space. Last year we sponsored, I believe, about 22, and this year we've already, with that added in, we're already well past the 30 mark. About 3,000 people have taken part in those, and those have been on, at this point, every continent but Antarctica, which is still on the list. And yeah, we're doing a lot of different things. As I said, it's really an ecosystem, but it's really designed to help to strengthen the exact community that has come into this room and beyond.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, why am I on this panel, Lucy? I'm Guido Romeo. I'm with Wired Italy, and I started looking into data journalism a couple years ago. My first teacher, I guess, was Aaron, so I really look up to him. And I could tell you that I'm the director of the data journalism team at Wired Italy, and that would be true, but should also tell you that I am basically the team. But I... because, well, we had an intern, a very good intern who left a couple of months ago, and so this is the team. But another way of saying this is that we adopted distributed architecture, lean and cost efficient, and so in fact I don't work alone, and I very rarely work alone on data journalism stories, and many of the people I work with on Italian stories are sitting in this room. And so I consider it to be wider than a newsroom team, and that's been very efficient and very productive in the last year. For those of you who were here last year and went through the data school, that was at impossible times in the morning. At one point, Aaron told us, "You guys in Italy, you should just do this thing and stop talking about it." And we're still talking about it, but we've been doing something, and hopefully we'll be able to show you some things. It's not only us at Wired Italy, it's a wider community, and it's a fastly growing community, I must say.
So despite the data, this is still all about the stories. And I just want to ask each of you, for you, what have been the groundbreaking stories of the past year? Personal opinions, they can be ones that your newsroom has produced that have really changed the way that data journalism is done in your newsroom or another news organisation. Any of you can chip in to start off with.
I mean, there's been a number of them that I thought were terrific. Again, I think the Sentinel piece stands out to me for a number of reasons, because it was a small team. It was one person, John Maines, who's their data editor down there, and they were able to acquire the database, do the analysis, and then publish relatively quickly, and just I think it was 6 weeks. I mean, it was a really short turnaround. So this is not unapproachable. This is something that normal people at normal newsrooms can do. That's a question I often get, is okay, yes, you're the New York Times, you have all these resources, but truly, that wasn't the case for most of my career. Most of my career was, again, like Guido, I was the data team. But it shows that it can be done by small teams. The Milwaukee Journal, I think, did a really great piece on using land records to find basically a property tax scam, where landowners who were supposed to be opening land for hunting were instead sort of skirting that law and taking advantage of this tax loophole to pay pennies on the dollar during one of the times when I think maybe even over here you've heard about how bad the budget situation is in Wisconsin. At a time when the state needs this money, they're paying pennies on the dollar in property taxes because they're taking advantage of this tax loophole. The only way you get that story, much like the Sun Sentinel, the only way you get that story is data journalism. There is no other way to get it. So that's, like Lucy said, this is really fundamentally comes down to one thing. We talk a lot about data. We talk a lot about nerdy things. We talk a lot about tools and techniques and programming and this and that and the other thing. But the other piece of this that is as important, more important, is journalism. It really has to come down to journalism, and that's the power of data journalism.
So to me, I think that it's always nice when you have something like the U.S. presidential elections, right? Something that happens every 4 years, because you can really kind of compare and contrast quite starkly about kind of where the state of things was then and then where it is now. And so to me, watching kind of news apps and data teams really come alive around the election was really thrilling to watch, and to see almost the kind of one-upsmanship and attempts at really knocking out of the park. I want to call out three things that came out of the election. One is a very election results related, and then two are much more very interesting investigative pieces that I also want to talk about for another reason, perhaps a little bit later on. But the first is on election results. to me, on election night, the go-to application was actually created by National Public Radio's almost brand new at the time news dev team. And what made it great was they decided to throw out the map, right? You know, when you have election results, it's always, at least in the United States, it's very easy to put a map of the U.S. up, make them red, make them blue, make each state red or blue depending on who wins it, and that's supposed to give us information about how the election has played out. The problem with that is that very big states are not populated very much, and so you get these maps that suddenly make it seem like there's this, you know, giant red landslide when in fact blue wins. NPR just decided to play it by the numbers, and they had something that they called the big board. It just filled your whole screen. It pushed its updates in real time, and it was just an incredible thing to just have kind of ambiently on and be able to watch the election roll in. I thought it was a really great and very elegant solution to what feels like a solved problem, but it was just kind of a new way of looking at it. I think the election also brought in some really good investigative pieces that came at the election from a very different angle, and actually both of those came from ProPublica in New York. One of them was called The Message Machine, which looked at the types of fundraising emails that were being sent out by the presidential campaigns. And for those of you that are going to be here for the whole event, Harper Reid, who is the CTO of the Obama for America campaign, will be keynote speaking. But he was instrumental in helping to develop software that enabled the Obama people to very micro-target their message to various people. And so actually the Message Machine piece came out from me, actually. I was sitting next to my wife when we both got emails from the Obama campaign at the same time, and hers was totally different than mine. And I threw it out on Twitter, like, hey, did anyone else get an email from Juliana Smoot right now? And I built a little form, just a spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet form for people to put in. I got about 100 in, and then the ProPublica people wrote me, and they said, you know, we're really interested in this. Can we throw this out to our people as well, our audience as well? So then they put the same form out, and then they actually built software. Right? Amazing software that enabled you to just auto-forward anything you got from the presidential campaigns. It would build a database specifically for your stuff. If you went in and actually filled out some demographic information about yourself, they were then able to begin to pattern match your emails against other people's emails and begin to really surface the algorithms that were actually making these decisions. It was just a brilliant, brilliant piece. That really did a lot to start to look into the kind of micro-targeting they did. They took a similar kind of crowdsourcing approach to a application called Free the Files, which this is arcane U.S. election financing policy. But if you buy ads on television, you have to put a ad request in at the television station, and they're required by law to hang on to those requests because it's an election purchase. But they really aren't required by law to do anything except hang on to them, right? And they are often faxes or bad Xeroxes or things like that. It is a giant, dark matter of election financing. And ProPublica began to go to these television stations, request these things, get them up online, and they ended up with thousands of these really terrible, you know, scans of stuff. And they built a game essentially around it. And they had people read them, fill in a very simple form, smack a button, and then you get another one, right? And they kept a leaderboard of people that were helping to free these files. They ended up with hundreds of millions of dollars, right, that they were able to record, and tens of thousands of files that had actually been parsed. And it was just a really, really brilliant way of going about digging into kind of election financing in a totally different way.
Back to Italy. I should say something, about Italy. We're not quite there with what you hear, what you see abroad. We don't have institutions per publica yet. But I think two kind of things should be mentioned. One is the availability of data. This has changed a lot in the last year. Credit must be given to certain parts of the government. For instance, the Ministero della Coesione, which is the minister in charge of European funds, among other things, and they have probably put out the best data sets on European funds, and something that just last year Caitlin Barr was here talking about during her investigation with the Financial Times, and how hard it was to gather that data. So finally, that's a big step for the journalism community in Italy. We're still not seeing it used that much, but it's really interesting because it's a lead to investigate organized crime. Organized crime in Italy is I'm very interested in alternative energies, and alternative energies are financed by European funds. On the more strictly journalistic side, we're not at all at the level of other European countries or the US, but I think, well, I'll do a very Italian thing and mention one of our stories. So, and in fact, I think a story that really put data journalism on the map for our newsrooms and for, say, the community I hear is a story done by Elisabetta, who is here, and that was called Safe Schools. Scuole Sicure, maybe some of you have heard of it. And we basically Elisabetta went out and digged out data. She really digged because it was pretty well hidden. Data on earthquake risk of school buildings. And the story is pretty sad. We got 45,000 school buildings in Italy. Italy is a very seismic country with very high risk zones. Less than, well, about 22,000 of these buildings are at risk zones, and less than 1 in 10 of these buildings in risk zones have been inspected. And this came out through a data investigation, and as Aaron says, again, I mean, this is the only way you get there is through the data, and it got some people mad. It got people mad in the Ministry of Education, which I think is good. It got a lot of people interested. It got a lot of families, a lot of school teachers interested. It opened a problem. Of course, we didn't solve it, but we built a map out of it. So I was haunted for about 2 weeks by blogger moms checking their schools on the website. But I think that was the first step, because it's a work that we've done ourselves, so I'm sorry I have to self-celebrate, but it showed what can be done in Italy with very little data available up front. So I hope people will surpass us soon.
We need some examples to start off with. While we touched on the topic of elections in the States just now, I just wanted to put to you guys whether has there been a change post Nate Silver? Are people now seeing the different side of journalism? It's no longer a looking back at the history, but also starting to take on the kind of predictive and estimating what's going to happen in the future. That would be great.
You want me to take that? Okay. Yeah, so who here is not familiar with Nate Silver's work? I'm curious. If you have never heard of Nate Silver, if you're not familiar, okay. Really? All right, good. Well, let me explain a little bit about who he is and what he does. Nate Silver was a blogger. He started his career as he's not a journalist, now he's starting to sort of call himself a journalist, actually. But he is a statistician by training. And he originally was interested in things like gambling and sports. And he used to build these sort of predictive models around baseball. There's a long history of this in the U.S. of coming up with these sort of new statistics to track actual performance that go beyond the ones that are printed in the paper online. And a while back, he decided, you know what, I think I can start applying these same kinds of ideas to predicting political elections and build a statistical model that could more accurately predict what may or may not happen in an election, or at least give you an understanding of where things are now, because that's really what predictive means in the context of statistics. If I were to build this model. Now, how did you know what was going on in the political landscape at that time? Well, you would look at the polls, right? But polls are not created equally. Some are better than others. Some are done methodologically correct. Some are not so good. You listen to the pundits, right? The people who are supposed to know. The Karl Roves, the Joe Scarboroughs, you know, the people who are on television telling you based on their experience, oh no, don't mind the polls. Actually, John McCain's going to win, or Mitt Romney, he's actually going to win. Well, Nate blew that whole model up completely. In the 2008 election, he got the election completely right, and predicted correctly 49 out of 50 states. In 2012, he actually improved his performance, got it completely right in a much closer election, and got 50 out of 50 states correct. Right at the end of the election, he became a very controversial figure, because as the pollsters, not the pollsters, but as the political class, the reporters were saying, well, this is a very close race. As the pollsters were saying, well, maybe, maybe not. As the pundits were saying, well, maybe, maybe not. Nate Silver was predicting, and I kid you not, in the final week of the campaign, that Barack Obama had an over 90% chance of winning the election. As it turns out, he was absolutely right. And his final number was actually more conservative than the actual final figure in the election. And he deliberately said that he was conservative in his modeling. He knew, Nate will tell you now, he knew as those first results were coming in, he knew within an hour that he was absolutely right. But he was not quite confident enough to actually say that. But knowing Nate, believe me, I believe him. So what ended up happening? The controversy, thank God, kind of went his way. It was an utter victory for what I'm going to describe as one form of data journalism, and that's applying the statistics and statistical modeling to storytelling. Nate is a very specific kind of journalist, and I think he has emerged from this. He also happened to have released his book at exactly the right time, which, by the way, was a year late. so he's very wise to be a procrastinator at exactly the right time. And so what's happened since is now everybody's going to start. This actually worries me a little bit because what's absolutely going to happen now is everybody's going to have their Nate Silver, and it's not going to be Nate Silver doing just politics. It's going to be Nate Silver doing sports, Nate Silver doing the Oscars, Nate Silver doing this, Nate Silver doing that. Now, all of that, I believe fully that Nate Silver can do, and Nate says that he wants to kind of like broaden his horizon somewhat. I worry about the people who are not as brilliant as Nate Silver trying to do this and getting it wrong. I believe there's going to be a bumper crop of Nate Silvers out there, and many of them are not going to be particularly good at it. That worries me enormously. So that's been the sort of the since November impact.
Can I jump in on that as well? I think that to me, I mean, I agree that there are going to be a lot of people that get it wrong, right? I think especially among the kind of pundit class of people, they're going to hire mathematicians to help them be able to say, I've got my metrics as well. I mean, you actually saw this post Nate Silver with baseball, right? Like he really did kind of similarly to how he upended the pundits in elections, he actually upended baseball pundits as well, because he was able to say, hey, you know what? The math proves this person wrong. So you're gonna begin to see people hiring on, but I think that's kind of the negative side of it, right? I think the positive side is you're actually going to see a lot of people that are very good at math suddenly realizing that there's an outlet for them in journalism, right? I would actually call out very specifically during our fellowship search process, we had a math PhD from Berkeley who's kind of he measures the size of the universe. Right? That's his normal job. And he actually reached out to us because he was very interested in working in the newsroom, very specifically name-checked Nate Silver as a result of that. You know, I think that broadly Nate has made people realize that you know what, if you're dealing with numbers, it's probably helpful if you know how to do math, right? And that there's actually quite a bit in this world where knowing math is incredibly useful. And I think right now, we've never really had that outlet. Scott Klein at ProPublica and I have talked before about how, you know, at the entry level of doing journalism, which is, at least in the States, the high school newspaper, right? The people that are attracted to the high school newspaper are often the creative writers and poets and things like that at the high school, because they see this as an outlet for what they're doing, right? And the more Nate Silvers you can have means the more people that are involved on the math team and stuff like that begin to see a possible route that they have. We're not going to get from one Nate Silver to, you know, 100 overnight, but that is definitely a goal that we want to get to. We need more statisticians, we need more data scientists, we need those types of people in journalism quite desperately.
Brilliant. I'd just like to follow up to ask a specific question to Guido about the Italian context. I believe when we spoke last year, you were quite excited about an impending freedom of information law. And I just wanted to check in with you now and see what the kind of status quo is on that law.
There was a press release a couple of months ago saying there was an Italian FOIA, so an Italian Freedom of Information Act. In fact, together with other associations as FOIA.it, Andrea Fama is here from this association. We have been looking very closely and evaluating this, and it's not a freedom of information law. It's a transparency law, basically, so it has proactive measures. I don't know how many of you are familiar with freedom of information laws around the world, but basically there's a proactive disclosure of information. That's when an administration, a government, publishes data on the website. It just releases data by itself. And this is what has been done in Italy. And a reactive form, which is the most interesting for a journalist, and that's when you ask a question and the government is supposed to answer you, because that's your civil right, unless there's a matter of national security and blah blah blah. And so it falls. There's exception to that right. So this recent law hasn't touched on the reactive part, which is the most interesting, again, for us. We're fighting back very, very strongly. And, okay, apologies for self-quoting myself again, but self-advertising myself. But tomorrow morning, we're presenting at the Centro Servizi Alessi the first report on access to information in Italy. This is a work that has been, a study that has been done with the support of the Open Society Foundations. And so we looked at how journalists and citizens are able or not able to access information in practice on the ground. So we didn't look at the stuff on paper, but we really went there and did it as you do in real life. The outcomes are very bleak, because it's more than, well, basically 3 out of 4 times you don't get what you want. That's not a reason for stopping to ask, of course.
We remain hopeful.
We keep fighting. I mean, the hope is, we hope to get out of business soon on that one, but I don't think so.
Excellent. So moving from the retrospective.
Can I add one thing on Nate Silver? Because,
please do.
I mean, we had all these, I know at least, colleagues from at least 4 or 5 major outlets in Italy who had their editors running in their newsroom screaming, "We got to do this too. How do you do this?" And it was totally worrying. It was dramatic because first there were very few people knowing how to do this. Nate's way of doing it is not fully replicable in Italy. And our government is so enlightened that, in fact, they solved the problem for us because they made it illegal to publish surveys based on that data for the 2 weeks prior to elections. So, I mean, everybody has this thing. I personally know one scientist who went to the lawyer and just said, okay, this is my forecast, and I'll put it here 15 days in advance. I saw some of the results, and they weren't close to what they were good, but not as close as Nate Silver at all. And none of them saw Beppe Grillo strong as it has come out. So they were off the mark by more than 9%, which is huge in statistics.
Mm-hmm. Last thing, and sorry about Nate Silver. The other thing about statistics, that anyone who has ever done this, and I've done a little bit of it, but I've done enough to know that I should not be doing it, at least not without a lot of adult supervision, is that statistics is often wrong. You say that this, you talk about confidence intervals. Well, this survey was done, it's a 90%, it's done with a 90% confidence or 95% confidence. That means that 9 out of 10 times, the results that you get via sampling or whatever, using probability, they are going to be right. 1 time out of 10, you're going to get something that's going to be completely whacked. And Nate will be wrong. He will be wrong spectacularly. It will happen. Nate will be the first to tell you that. The thing that worries me about what Guido is saying is that every editor in every newsroom in America also did the exact same thing. And there's going to be a lot of editors who do not understand that this is not a precise science. They do not understand that this is based on probability. They do not understand the dangers of being utterly wrong and getting this completely wrong. That's what worries me. Now, I totally agree with Dan that this may have many, many good sides to it, and one of them is getting more statisticians into newsrooms. God bless. Let's get more into newsrooms. But it really worries me as we're getting near to the midterm elections, 2014 in the U.S., that we're going to see just this incredible explosion of really, really bad stats. Oh.
I've just been informed that this is actually a 60-minute session and not a 90-minute session, so we're going to have to speed up slightly. I wanted to make sure that people from the floor got the chance to ask their questions. So do we have a microphone for people to ask questions from the floor? A question in the middle. Somebody coming from behind you, James.
Hi there, James Paul at The Guardian. I'm going to ask a Nate Silver question, I'm afraid. I worry, and I'm interested as to whether you guys worry about the cult of Nate, actually. He is phenomenal, incredible writer, but he got the UK election in 2010 spectacularly wrong. Like, he made Fox News look good, and he was very good about it, very humble, wrote it all up, he hasn't hidden any of it. But it's because US polls are amazing, state by state, really detailed, loads of them, several a day. The input is amazing, and the way other news outlets used them was rubbish. And so Nate actually has, firstly, he's been built up as this sort of god of statistics, which maybe actually is intimidating to other outlets and other people. His methods are closed. It's a closed box. He doesn't publish his working, which is actually quite bad in data journalism terms. And his raw data is very good. And I actually worry, it's set in this wizardish way. It's set in this amazing thing. And is that actually a risk of being a problem as well as an opportunity?
I could not have said it better myself. Absolutely 100% right. And for a variety of reasons, his methodology, he has his quote-unquote secret sauce. And so that's his methodology that he applies. And it's also, actually, it's not true that polls are fantastic. There's a lot of them. But Nate's modeling, Nate is particularly good at knowing the good polls from the bad polls and weighting them properly. And that's why he's so good in the States and was so, as you say, spectacularly wrong in the case of the UK. I absolutely, this is terrifying, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say, you know, as with anything, your output is only ever as good as your input, right? And he's, you know, part of the reason that he's been good at the U.S. is the amount of input that is there, and also historical data to be able to put in as well, is huge. So I actually, and this is as a just dipped in the sauce Nate Silver fanboy, right? I actually worry when he thinks about spreading out to other things. Like he, you know, it feels like, dude, you're good at this thing. Like, you're not a wizard, right? Like you don't believe that you're a wizard either.
And we'd love a non-Nate Silver question. I would love a non-Nate Silver question.
I can accommodate you there. My name is Natasha Yefimova-Trilling. I actually work in Moscow for RIA Novosti, the organization that, it turns out, I didn't know, translated the data handbook into Russian. I have a very practical question. So you guys all have mentioned situations where you're the whole data team, right? But what if a person, an editor, interested in expanding into data journalism isn't that person who can be that one-person data team, and you're a run-of-the-mill print journalist, you love the nut graph, you love double-checking the facts, you love words, you love structure, you have ideas, but you need to pull together a team who can realize these ideas. Do you have any practical advice on the key components, the key people that you definitely need to have in a small team who can take this idea of how to turn data into great journalism and make it happen? Like, you need to have person A with this skill set, person B. Do you have any practical tips on that?
Yeah. So I come from an organization. The reason I ended up falling into sort of the data journalism world is an organization called IRE, Investigative Reporters and Editors. The nerd wing of IRE is the National Institute for Computer Assisted Reporting, and there are so many resources there that will help you. If you want to be that person, if you want to start doing some basic work yourself, you can look there. There's all kinds of ways to get started. There's training, there's books, there's tutorials, you name it. There's also a lot of training that you can do through IRE NICAR, an annual conference. So if you're looking to start a team, that's probably where I would start, because fundamentally, again, it's about journalism, and NICAR is the group of journalists who are also sort of data specialists. That's where folks like the ones that Dan are talking about, that's where they hang out, that's where I hang out. Recently, we've had an influx of folks who do a lot of data visualization, all sorts of different disciplines, but that at least in the States, is kind of where it is. It's by far the biggest. I would look there. I would look for somebody who can do some really solid work with databases, with spreadsheets, but understands what it means to do that in the context of journalism. And as an example, you get a government database, you need to make sure that you not only know what the data is and what's good about it, you need to know what's bad about it. You can't just take government data. It's a source, right? You treat it like a source. You wouldn't just take anything that a source tells you at face value without checking it. What's the phrase? You know, it's like if you ask your mother whether she loves you, you know, blah blah blah. You know, check it out. You would never do that, and don't do that with data. So that's kind of the at least the core, I think, is starting there, and then I would say you branch out into other areas of, like, you know, finding people who can take that journalism and express it publicly onto the web, and create news apps, which is kind of what my team does. To take this data and allow readers to explore it themselves, to create their own narrative, to do their own analysis, to create kind of tools so that they can kind of see what's relevant to them. That's what ProPublica does so spectacularly well. And other news organizations are doing so spectacularly well. But I think it starts fundamentally with kind of knowledge of how to acquire data, where to get data, what to do with data, but do it from the sensibility of a journalist. And NICAR is kind of the epicenter of that.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap the panel up, because we're gonna be chucked out of here in a second. But I just want to give you all 30 seconds to say one thing that you're kind of looking forward to from a data journalism perspective from 2013, an event, a kind of a movement, anything that you think is going to shape this upcoming year and people should be watching out for. Guido, do you want to start us off?
the Data Journalism Awards you're going to announce in a few days. No, I think that's really important, especially for our crowd, because it really shows what can be done and what is being done by fellow journalists. And I mean, the other side of the Atlantic looks so far away sometimes in terms of resources, means, data available, and everything. There's a lot of the submissions. I know there's a lot of European stuff, and that's good. And the other thing is a website Elisabetta is launching, is presenting Friday at 9:30, and that's datajournalist.it. So it's supposed to be like a big slice of what is being done in Italy will be there, and there's a business model behind it, which is interesting, and you'll hear about it Friday, so I don't want to spoil that one.
Dan, 30 seconds.
I would say to me the most exciting thing that's happening right now, and you'll continue to see, is the realization that we can begin to hack hardware to do data collection. And I think that leading the way, actually, before Newsrooms was the Safecast network, who built radiation monitors to distribute to people in Japan post earthquake and Fukushima power plant. But you're really beginning to see some of the work that they did trickle into Newsrooms, and people realizing that we can actually build sensor networks and things like that to begin to bring in the data that we just can't get any other way.
I'm going to do two things, but I'm going to do them really fast. I'm going to agree 100% with Dan that the hardware is the most exciting thing. Google Cicada Project and WNYC. Cicada Project WNYC. Amazing. John Keefe is a genius. Also, I will say, I think the most exciting thing for me, the most eye-opening thing, was the Obama campaign and what they were able to accomplish using data mining and sophisticated data mining techniques. That inspired me to start doing the same thing at the New York Times, to try to bring the same tools and techniques to cover the people who are using these tools to get elected. That, to me, I think, is a great undiscovered country.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for coming. We will see you at the next session, which is at 9:30 tomorrow morning. If you want to come and learn how to, it's about cross-border investigations and how to do networks around journalism. We'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.